Hello everyone and welcome to a Music Theory Minute. I'm Floyd Richmond and today we're going to look at intervals. As composers combine notes to harmonize their melodies, they found some combinations of notes to be pleasing, consonant, some to be unpleasing, dissonant, and some to be hollow, neutral. This section will provide vocabulary for better classifying these intervals. The vocabulary of this section will also enable quicker analysis and building of chords. So far, scales and key signatures have been built using the intervals of whole and half steps, and occasionally a step and a half. If we alternate the first notes with the other notes of a scale, we see the increasing distances between them, and this suggests a system for describing those distances. These distances, intervals, are labeled below. To determine the distance of an interval, count 1 on the lowest note, then count each line or space between them until the upper note is reached. From C to G is a fifth. Counting C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, and G is 5, we can see that it's a fifth. Intervals may be presented melodically, where the notes follow one another as shown above, or harmonically, where the notes sound at the same time as shown below. When the upper note of the interval is in the major scale of the lower note, the interval is said to be a perfect or major, as indicated on this chart. Unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves are perfect. Intervals of a second, third, sixth, or seventh are major. It seems unusual to have two different labels for these notes, but the reasons have to do with the simple mathematical ratios used to generate the frequencies of unisons, 1 to 1, octaves, 2 to 1, and fifths, 3 to 2. And with the inversion of intervals, which we'll talk about later, and with the harmonies that were acceptable historically. In the history of music, unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves were used to harmonize music before intervals of a second, third, sixth, or seventh. Any perfect or major interval may be made larger, augmented, by raising the top note a half step or lowering the bottom note a half step. Any perfect or major interval may be made smaller by lowering the top note a half step or raising the bottom note a half step. Major intervals become minor and perfect intervals become diminished when made smaller. This chart summarizes the quality of intervals when made larger or smaller and their common abbreviations. If you examine the chart, you will notice that when a major interval, like a second or a third, sixth, or seventh, is made larger, it becomes augmented. If you were to make it larger by a half step again, it would become doubly augmented. Perfect intervals also become augmented and doubly augmented when made larger. It's when the intervals are made smaller that there is a difference. Major intervals made smaller by a half step are minor, made smaller by 2 half steps, they're diminished. Perfect intervals made smaller go directly to diminished, and if made smaller by 2 half steps, are doubly diminished. It's impossible to tell the difference between inharmonically spelled intervals by listening. For example, the augmented second and the minor third sound exactly the same. The notes in a staff would need to be seen to tell the difference. Consequently, when listening to music, people identify the most commonly used interval. The most used intervals are the perfect unison, a minor second, a major second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth, tritone, perfect fifth, minor sixth, minor seventh, major seventh, and perfect octave. The tritone is an abbreviation for the interval of an augmented fourth or diminished fifth, which are inharmonically the same. The following chart lists intervals from most consonant to most dissonant. The most consonant intervals, those that blend together and are most pleasing to our ear, would be major thirds, major sixths, and minor sixths. The most neutral intervals would be the perfect unison, perfect octave, perfect fifth, and perfect fourth. The most dissonant intervals are the major second, the minor seventh, the minor second, the major seventh, and the tritone. Thank you for joining us today for a Music Theory Minute. Be sure to like and subscribe.